afternoon. It's Thursday, the 6th of August. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Israeli reaction to the televised address from U.S. President Barack Obama over the Iranian nuclear deal has generally been negative. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's former national security advisor, Reserve Major General Yaakov Amidror, said that the agreement will likely lead to the need for a use of force against Tehran to halt its race toward nuclear weapons. Here are some of the highlights of last night's address at the American University in Washington.
Congressional rejection of this deal leaves any U.S. administration that is absolutely committed to preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon with one option: another war in the Middle East. And here's the irony. As I said before, military action would be far less effective than this deal in preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. That's not just my supposition. Every estimate, including those from Israeli analysts, suggest military action would only set back Iran's program by a few years at best, which is a fraction of the limitations imposed by this deal. In such a dangerous neighborhood, Israel has to be vigilant, and it rightly insists that it cannot depend on any other country, even its great friend the United States, for its own security. So we have to take seriously concerns in Israel. So to friends of Israel and to the Israeli people, I say this: a nuclear-armed Iran is far more dangerous to Israel, to America, and to the world than an Iran that benefits from sanctions relief. I recognize that Prime Minister Netanyahu disagrees strongly. I do not doubt his sincerity. But I believe he is wrong. I believe the facts support this deal. I believe they are in America's interest and Israel's interest. And as President of the United States, it would be an obligation of my constitutional duty to act against my best judgment, simply because it causes temporary friction with a dear friend and ally. I do not believe that would be the right thing to do for the United States. I do not believe it would be the right thing to do for Israel.
Former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Gil Herman, critiqued the Obama speech for Fox News, and here are a few of his comments.
Well, I listened very carefully and I watched the speech, and I also heard the applause at the American University. I just fear that the biggest applause and the biggest celebration tonight is actually in Tehran and in Iran, because here's the President of the United States, the greatest country on earth, the leader of the free world, apologizing, being apologetic for American foreign policy over the years, and describing how poor America will be all alone if this deal doesn't come through, and then accusing Israel of opposing this deal. Now, he pointed out that every country in the world except Israel supports it. I'm not sure that's true. I am sure that Israel is the only country in the world who Iran threatens time and time again, including just recently by its president and the Ayatollah, to wipe off the face of the earth. And the biggest question truly is, what if the president is wrong? What if his belief in Iran is wrong? He's been wrong before. He's been wrong on Syria, he's been wrong on Egypt, he's been wrong on Libya, he's also been wrong on Iran. What if he's wrong? For him, it's another speech that maybe didn't go so well. For Israel, it's existential. And therefore, I think that the Israeli Prime Minister is doing the right thing by opposing this deal. This is not politics. This is not grandstanding. This is truly out of anxiety and a belief that he has been elected to prevent a second Holocaust, which the Iranians are denying while preparing the next one. Now, it is true that the president has done a lot for Israel's security, but if Iran becomes nuclear, and this deal could very well end up with a nuclear Iran, then all that help will be of absolutely no use, and Israel will be the target of Iran. And you know, what I ask Americans to do is not to believe us, and not just to listen to us. Listen to the Iranians. Listen what they say when they chant death to America, when they want to wipe Israel off the face of the map, when they deny the Holocaust.
And this just in, at least 2 people were injured when a Palestinian driver rammed his vehicle into a group of Israelis near the West Bank community of Shiloh along Route 60. The Palestinian terrorist was shot and killed by the IDF. If there are any updates, we'll bring them to you later in this program. Returning to the news, and the cabinet passed a 2-year budget early this morning following a marathon all-night session. The approval ends weeks of political infighting that included last-minute deals that will now allow the budget to be passed to the Knesset. Here with more is IBA's political correspondent, Ellie Wogelenter.
It was close to 4 o'clock this morning when the cabinet finally approved the 2015-2016 state budget, with 20 ministers voting in favor and just Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon abstaining. Because the discussions went on for so long, most ministers were not present during the vote, and those who had gone home left a note saying that they were voting in favor. The 2015 budget totals 329 billion shekels, and the 2016 budget will total 343 billion shekels. Netanyahu had warned ministers that his government would collapse if they did not put a stop to their demands and rally behind his budget. Ya'alon refused to support it because of a gap of some 5 billion shekels between what defense officials were demanding and what Finance Minister Moshe Kachlon was prepared to allocate. The defense budget will stand at 57 billion for 2015 and 55 billion for next year. The Prime Minister lamented that all the talk was about how to split the pie rather than how to make it larger. We have to continue the economic growth, and that is why the level of taxation will not increase, Netanyahu said. When the money gets to the citizens' hands, they will make better use of it than the bureaucrats would. There are reforms in the budget that reduce the cost of living for the citizens of Israel. It is important to reduce the prices of food, transportation, and health, and increase the supply of housing. The deficit target for 2015 and 16 is 2.9% of the GDP, which is up from the 2.5% plan for 2015 and 2% for 2016. According to Bank of Israel estimates, the higher deficit will lead to the first increase in Israel's debt burden since the global financial crisis took its toll in 2009. Treasury officials managed to convince the reluctant ministers to adopt the budget after additions to individual ministry budgets were promised. Those additions went to the Internal Security Ministry, Sports and Culture Ministry, and the Education Ministry, thus securing the votes of Gilad Erdan, Miri Regev, and Naftali Bennett. The budget now goes to the Knesset, where it will face additional fighting and tweaking over the particulars. The initial vote is scheduled for August 31st, and the final approval is set for November 19th. Erin?
Thanks for that report. Barring a last-minute settlement, a strike by airport workers is set to shut down Ben Gurion International Airport over the weekend. The work stoppage comes during the peak of the summer holidays and could affect some 30,000 travelers arriving and departing on more than 200 flights. The Union for the Airport Employees says that labor sanctions will begin at sundown on Friday night, and operations will only return to normal after the showing of 3 stars in the sky on Saturday evening. The workers are demanding that all personnel at the airport be hired directly by the airport authority rather than on a contract basis. One of the young men being held in administrative detention for alleged involvement in far right-wing violence is 18-year-old Mordechai Meir of Ma'ale Adumim. He and his family are recent immigrants from the United States. His parents are denying that their son is an extremist and told reporters that they are shocked by his arrest.
Our children love Israel. That's what we raised our children to be like, and they are definitely following in that way. They love people, and frankly, we're in shock.
All we can say is our son was detained in the house for about a week. And then last night, there was a knock on the door, and they showed us a paper. And on the paper, it says they're going to take him to some sort of a jail for 6 months. No word on why they're doing this. No word on that he was suspected of some crime. No word on anything. Just they're taking him to jail with no accusation, with nothing, no suspicion, taking him to jail. As my wife said, we left America, which is a democracy. We came to Israel, which is also a democracy. And we found that they can take away an 18-year-old child who hasn't, as far as we know, done anything or been charged with anything, take him to jail for a half year and never charge him with anything.
And is your son associated with, or does he believe in this ideology which is associated with so-called Jewish terrorism?
Not at all. I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is they needed to arrest somebody. So he was, like the lawyer here said, he was a scapegoat.
And what can you tell me something about what he believes in? What has made him a scapegoat? Tell me something about his way of life.
As far as I know,
what does he believe in?
He believes in the beauty and the idea of settling Israel and of finding God in every facet of life. If there's anything he's guilty of, it's this.
President Reuven Rivlin today accepted the credentials of the incoming diplomatic corps at his official residence in Jerusalem. As he hosted 5 new ambassadors to the country, the president underscored the significance of strengthening cooperation between Israel and its allies, particularly in light of international efforts to boycott the Jewish state.
We are looking eye to eye with the idea that we have to find a way in order to create confidence measures between the Israeli and the Palestinians. We are here living together. Everyone has to understand that the other side is living together here as well. And we know that the friendship between the German administration and the Palestinian is very good. And we know that, and we appreciate the relationship between our two countries.
Indeed, we have achieved good relations. And because it is this tragic history that binds us together, the security of Israel is for us the most important thing in our bilateral relations. Everything else comes to a second or third place. So this clear commitment to the security of Israel, I can state that for all our government and for the German people will remain the same.
I think a big part of my job for the next 4 years will be to develop the ties that we have in trade and investment and science and technology, which are, I think, of great benefit to both countries. And they're also the best answer we have to those who call for boycotts of Israel. So that is one of my top priorities, to work for more cooperation in those areas.
Today marks 70 years since the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima at the close of the Second World War. Emotional ceremonies were held in the Japanese city, where U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made a connection between Hiroshima and the nuclear deal reached with Iran. We get more in this report from IBA's Dennis Zinn.
The sun rose over Hiroshima, Japan this morning, exactly 70 years after the city was hit by a nuclear bomb, the first ever that was dropped on a civilian target. Shinto priests gathered by the river near the atomic bomb dome, which marks the epicenter of the blast, to pray in the hope that the experience of Hiroshima will never be repeated. 140,000 people died, either immediately from the explosion or later from radiation sickness. 75-year-old Kazuko Nagaya, who lost her parents, said that the event brings back memories of suffering and pain. The United States dropped a second bomb on Nagasaki 3 days after Hiroshima, causing Japan to surrender and bringing the Second World War to a close. Today in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, at a meeting with Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of a regional summit, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry addressed the meaning of the Hiroshima commemoration.
Needless to say, it's a very, very powerful reminder of not just the impact of war in a lasting way on people, on countries, but it's also underscores the importance of the agreement we've reached with Iran to reduce the possibility of more nuclear weapons.
Kerry also said that since that difficult time, the United States and Japan have become firm allies.
Our relationship today with Japan is one of the most important that we have in the world. We've found great democracies that work together, and we share common values and a common vision for the future. And I think today is really a great tribute to the remembrance, but also to the possibilities of the future.
The Hiroshima commemoration comes at a time when Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe seeks to loosen the constraints of Japan's post-war pacifist constitution in order to deter what he considers growing regional threats. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
The Mediterranean Sea has become the world's deadliest passage for migrants, with more than 2,000 having lost their lives while trying to reach European shores so far this year. We get more on the latest capsized boat in this report from Ellen Dorfeva.
A fishing boat carrying an estimated 700 people, including women and children, overturned near the Libyan coast yesterday. At least 25 bodies have so far been recovered. As Italian rescue operations continue, approximately 400 people have been saved. But the death toll is expected to rise in what is considered one of the biggest sea accidents since earlier this year, when 800 people drowned in the same area.
These are boats that, should only have about 30 or 40 or 50 on board, not 600. So obviously the people were stuffed down into the hull, shoulder to shoulder, feet to feet, in every nook and cranny. So much that when a rescue boat approached, people became anxious and excited and tipped the boat over.
In attempts to escape poverty, war and violence, thousands of migrants from Africa, the Middle East and Asia risk their lives hoping to find asylum and jobs, mainly in northern European countries. In a separate development last night, large groups of migrants were detected trying to cross train tracks of the Eurotunnel terminal in northern France, as they tried to make their way into freight trains. Over 3,000 people have reportedly set up a camp in that region, and every evening some of them try to cross this channel. Since the beginning of the June, 9 people already died on this route. While international organizations are working to aid and rescue the thousands of migrants, critics claim their work is actually encouraging more people to try and sneak into Europe illegally. This is Ellen Dorfeva for IBA News.
Archaeologists are studying the rare inscriptions found on the walls of a newly discovered mikveh in Jerusalem dating back to the Second Temple period. Linguists will now have the task of deciphering the ancient graffiti from the past. IBA's R.A. O'Sullivan was there and filed this report.
It was a salvage dig excavating what will soon be a nursery school when archaeologists discovered a cavity underground. They crawled into the small carved entrance, buried since the time of the Second Temple, flipped on a torch, and were astonished. The walls had a message from the past. They were filled with inscriptions and drawings, most scrawled with mud, and were preserved because the cave was filled and buried. It turns out it was a mikveh, or ritual bath.
It was an amazing discovery. From my experience, this was a very unique find. We know about hundreds of mikvaot in the Jerusalem area, but it's very rare that we find inscriptions and drawings from the Second Temple period. In this mikveh, they were preserved in a very high state of preservation, and we were able to decipher inscriptions and understand a few dozen drawings, which include palm trees, ships, and possibly a drawing of a menorah.
The graffiti wasn't a dedication or praise to a king, but the writings of the simple people, the Jews of the era. 2,000-year-old graffiti. It was Hebrew script of the Aramaic language.
From what I understand, there are a few private names which are written in Aramaic. Some of the names appear in the lexicon of the period, but it's still too early to say if my interpretation is correct. This subject needs to be studied maybe for many years in order to completely understand the messages which were written.
In archaeology, you often find items, walls, buildings from the past era, and it's very rare that you are able to receive a postcard from the past.
These inscriptions reflect the daily life of the people who either used the mikveh or used this cave possibly to live in it, or maybe to hide in it during a period of war or turmoil. So these inscriptions are not inscriptions which are meant to be read by many people. They're part of people's private lives, and they reflect the daily life of the Jews who are using this mikveh at the end of the second temple period.
The entrance to the cave was covered in large boulders and completely concealed under the soil and stones, possibly intentionally, thus adding further mystery to the find. The Antiquities Authority have removed the plaster walls for further study. Aria O'Sullivan for IBA News.
The national El Al airliner has announced plans to buy or lease up to 15 new Boeing Dreamliner passenger jets over the next 5 years. The $900 million deal is considered to be the company's largest ever acquisition. El Al's entire fleet of 41 planes were manufactured by Boeing, and the new 787s may be used to replace some of the older models, helping the Israeli airline in its quest to expand flights to North America. The agreement also includes purchase rights for an additional 13 planes. Taking a look at local finance, and both the shekel and share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange put in a mixed performance today. Here's a look at the numbers. The IBA weather team tells us that we can expect severe heat stress this weekend, as the Sharav desert heat wave shows no sign of letting up until maybe a slight drop on Sunday. You're looking at the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. And this recap before closing: at least 2 people were seriously injured while they were waiting at a hitchhiking stand near the West Bank community of Shiloh this afternoon. IDF troops managed to shoot and kill the Palestinian driver who rammed his car into them. We thank you for being with us this afternoon, and we hope you'll join us again tomorrow, when I'll be back to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem.